Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Christ Community Church. So glad to have you with us this morning to worship God together. My family and I moved into our house about 11 years ago. When we moved in, all of our possessions fit into the back of one big U-Haul truck. It was the biggest U-Haul truck that you could rent, but everything fit. Now, fast forward to a couple of months ago when we accepted the invitation to come to Christ Community Church to be the pastor out there. And my family started to get ready for our move to Piatone. One of the first things that we did was get a quote from a moving company, and we were shocked when we had our virtual tour with a moving company, and they said that it would probably take 3 big trucks to move all of our stuff to Piatone. And then we started to look around our house, and we realized just how much stuff we have accumulated in 11 years. We realized we did not want to move all of this stuff out there, and we didn't want to have to take 3 trucks, and so we started the process of whittling our things down. And we realized that even though we didn't even want to own most of this stuff, it was really hard to get rid of. It was hard to detach ourselves from some of the things that we had grown sentimental about without even realizing it. And then even the things we wanted to get rid of, it was hard just to find a place to take it, whether it was to donate it or throw it away or to give it away. And so getting rid of junk just became this chore. It's strange how our stuff can become such a trap. We buy things because we think it's going to make us happy, we think it's going to improve our lives, but yet so quickly our possessions can become a prison. Our wealth can become a trap. And this is a topic that Jesus addressed over and over and over. He spoke about wealth, about riches, almost as much as any other topic that he talked about. And that's going to be the topic of the parable that we're going to be looking at today, the parable of the rich fool. We have been in this series called Great Stories, Parables of Jesus from the book of Luke. And not only have we been trying to unpack what a few of these parables that Jesus spoke meant, but we also want to give you some tools so that as you come across parables in your everyday reading of the Bible, you can better interpret what they mean. A parable is simply a story that Jesus told where he took a relatable everyday experience and he set it alongside of a deeper theological truth so that we could better understand him, his teaching, and God. So let's go to the book of Luke, chapter 12, starting in verse 13, where we hear the story of the rich fool. Again, this begins with context. Jesus has been teaching a large crowd of people. And as he gets into this teaching, there's a break in verse 13. It says, "Someone in the crowd said to him, 'Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me.' Jesus replied, 'Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you?' Then he said to them, 'Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions.'" So the break in the story happens when this man steps up and says, "Jesus, please judge between my brother and I. Make him give me more of the inheritance." And Jesus replies, "Who appointed me the judge?" Well, actually, in those times, it was not uncommon for a Jewish teacher to be used as a judge in these sort of situations. And so this man, evidently, he has an older brother, and their father has passed away. So they've been left with an inheritance. I say that he probably is the younger brother because in those situations, the older brother in the family would have been the executor of the estate. And at that time, the older brother was entitled to, or typically was given, a double portion of the inheritance. So let's just say that there's just these 2 brothers, and their father passes away. Instead of just dividing everything in half and giving evenly to each one, you would have actually divided into 3. The older brother would have taken 2/3, the younger brother would have gotten what was left. And if there was a sister, sorry, but the girls didn't get a whole lot. And so we most likely have a younger brother here, and he is seeing his older brother take a double portion of this inheritance, and he's saying, "This isn't fair. I want an equal portion. Jesus, make him give me what I feel like I deserve." And Jesus says, "Who made me the judge?" Well, again, it would have been within his rights as a Jewish teacher to judge in these situations. But I think what Jesus is saying is, I don't have any desire to judge these petty legal disputes. But what I do want to judge is your heart. I want to take a look at your life, and I want to expose the greed that you are experiencing right now, and the negative relationship that you have with your brother. And I want to talk about that, not just about your wealth. And so he gives him this warning. He says, watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. Jesus does not want this man so focused on his wealth, so focused on his stuff and his brother's stuff, that it destroys his relationship with his brother and that he misses the greater point in life. Jesus does not want this man to be trapped by stuff. And it's in that context that he gives us this parable of the rich fool. Verse 16, and he told them this parable. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. So notice in the beginning of this parable, we have this huge harvest that comes in for this rich man, but it says that the ground produced the harvest. I think what Jesus is trying to make clear here is that it's not just that this rich man who owned this field worked really hard all growing season to make sure that he had this great harvest, but rather that the field itself is doing the work. In other words, this is a blessing from God. God has, for some reason, supernaturally allowed this field to produce over and above what this man would typically get or what he expected to get. And so now he's harvesting it and he realizes there is a lot of stuff here. There's a lot of grain. I don't even know what to do with it. It's not going to fit in my barns. I have nowhere to put this stuff. So he has a problem on his hands. Well, how could he address that problem? I mean, he could do nothing. He could just leave the extra out in the field. He could choose to sell it. Actually, the book of Leviticus has some insight for what the Jews were supposed to do in this sort of situation. Leviticus chapter 19, verses 9 and 10, it says, when you reap the harvest of your land, do not reap to the very edges of your field, or gather the gleanings to your harvest, or of your harvest. Do not go over your vineyard a second time, or pick up the grapes that have fallen. Leave them for the poor and the foreigner. I am the Lord your God. This was the system for the Israelites. They were supposed to leave extra in their field so that the poor, those who were in need, those who didn't have a field of their own to harvest from, could go out into that field after that initial harvest and they could pick up the excess. This was a way of helping the poor of the land. And so the expectation for this rich man who has this huge, abundant harvest is that he should leave the extra behind. At the very least, sell it to those who are in need. Oftentimes when God blesses us, in fact, I would say every time God blesses us, it's because he wants us to use it to bless other people. He doesn't just give us gifts because he wants us to be happy and enjoy those gifts all by ourselves. He gives us gifts, he gives us blessings so that we can share it with others, so that we can extend his love to our neighbors like we talked about last week. So the rich man has this problem. He has this huge amount of grain in his field. He doesn't know what to do with it. And so we go into verse 18 where it says, then he said, this is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. It doesn't occur to this man that this is a blessing from God that he should share with anyone else. Instead, he wants to use this as an opportunity to take an early retirement. He wants to tear down his barns and build bigger ones. Now, his barns are where he would have always stored the grain for the year. So he gets the harvest, he puts everything into the barns, and now he has enough food to live on for the rest of the year. So the fact that it doesn't fit in his barns means that he has well more than enough for getting through the next year. So he wants to tear those barns down and build bigger ones, and then it says he can eat, drink, be merry, take life easy. In other words, he doesn't even want to have to worry about farming the next year, maybe the next several years. He wants to just live on this abundant harvest by himself for as long as possible. He wants to retire early. This is where I believe our stuff can be a trap, or this illustrates how our stuff can be a trap. See, this man wants to build these big barns. He wants to accumulate all this stuff because he thinks it's going to make him happy. He thinks it's going to make his life better. But I think as most all of us have probably experienced, we buy things because it's going to make us, or we think it's going to make us happy. We accumulate stuff because we think it'll make our lives better. We might look at this rich man building these big barns and going through all this effort, and we might look at him and think that that's silly or think that that's foolish. But yeah, I feel like we do the same sort of thing. In fact, let me share some statistics with you. Did you know that the average American household has 300,000 items inside. If you don't believe me, maybe go home and check this afternoon. Count all your stuff. See if it accumulates up to 300,000. The average American home size has tripled in the past 50 years, and yet still 1 in 10 people pay for extra storage outside of their home. I currently have a storage unit, so I understand where this one's coming from. Here's another one I'm guilty of. Only 32% of people that have a 2-car garage can fit even 1 car in that garage. And almost no one can park 2 cars inside of a 2-car garage. Again, guilty as charged. The United States has upwards of 50,000 storage facilities. That's 5 times as many storage facilities as we have Starbucks. There's currently over 7 square feet of self-storage space for every man, woman, and child in the United States. We have an obsession with stuff. We love to accumulate things. We love to have as much stuff as possible. And we do this thinking it's going to make life better. Stuff can become a trap. It can become a prison. It can become hard to part with it. We have to spend money and time and energy to maintain the stuff that we have. And so this man decides that he's just going to buy into that trap. He's going to build the bigger barns, and he thinks it's going to make him happy. But then God intervenes. I think that this is the shocking element in the story. God actually steps in and speaks to this man. Verse 20, but God said to him, "You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself?" Now, I don't think what this is saying is that God is killing this man because he decided to build bigger barns. Rather, I think God is stepping in and saying, look, it's your time. You had no idea that you were spending the last days of your life to build these huge barns and to work on accumulating things for your future when that future was never even going to happen. You were so focused on accumulating things that you would have for a future that's never even going to come. This actually reminds me of Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verses 17 through 19, where the writer Solomon, said to be the wisest man ever, he writes this, "So I hated life because the work that is done under the sun was grievous to me. All of it is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. I hated all the things I had toiled for under the sun because I must leave them to the one who comes after me. And who knows whether that person will be wise or foolish? Yet they will have control over all the fruit of my toil into which I have poured my effort and skill under the sun. This too is meaningless." I think back to situations I've experienced where somebody has passed away and they have a house full of stuff that now their kids or their grandkids have to go through. And how many of those items that were so important to them, that it mattered so much to them that they kept and that they toiled over and that they had to take care of, and yet their kids come across it and they give it away or they throw it away. They have no attachment to it. It just becomes this chore to get rid of it. This is what God is telling this man here in Luke chapter 12. He's saying, you have spent the end of your life accumulating all this stuff and working so that you can accumulate more, and yet you're just going to die and not even enjoy it. And the people who come after you, they're going to have to decide what to do with it, and they might not even use it wisely. They might not enjoy it the way that you had intended. You would have been better off just enjoying the time that you had and using the blessings that I had given you to enrich other people. And so that's where Jesus steps in now with his conclusion to this message. He says, "This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for himself, but is not rich toward God." When we work on accumulating stuff for ourselves and we focus on our wealth, we focus on our possessions, it becomes this prison. And it becomes something that we just have to work to maintain. And then someday somebody's just going to have to decide what to do with it and might even throw most of it away. But if we are rich toward God, it sets us free. Only God can set us free from the prison of our stuff. Only God can. We can work all of our lives trying to be happy with all this stuff, but yet the way to truly experience joy is to use the things that we have to honor God, to bless other people. So if we get anything out of this morning, it is to focus on God, because again, only God can set us free from the prison of our stuff. So how do we do that? How do we be rich toward God so that he can set us free from this trap of thinking we have to accumulate more and take care of ourselves? Because when it comes down to it, the way that this man was living the way that a lot of us live, where we are dependent on our wealth, we're dependent on ourselves to secure our future. It's what I've heard a lot of pastors and scholars call practical atheism. It's when we might say that we believe in God, but the way that we're living actually shows that we believe more in ourselves. This man was trusting more in his wealth and his stuff than he was in God to protect him and care for him in his future. And I think a lot of us, especially here in America where we have so much stuff, can be guilty of this too. And so here's just a few things that I think that we can do to be rich toward God and less dependent on our stuff. First of all, we have to work to become less dependent on our finances. I think one of the biggest ways that we can be trapped by our stuff is to be in debt and to not live within our means, where we're continually accumulating more debt and becoming more of a slave to our finances. People like Dave Ramsey have done a great job providing some curriculum that you can use if you are in debt or if you're having trouble with your monthly budget and living within your means. Financial Peace University is a great resource you can use. There are other great programs out there, and I'm sure you might even know people who are great with finances that just would be great to just go talk to. If you can't take a financial peace course right now, if there's not curriculum that you have available to you, think of somebody that you know who's just great with their budget and just ask them for help. But take the steps necessary to start getting out of debt, to start living within your means, because that's one way that we can become trapped by our finances. So as we start, though, living within our means, not being in debt, the next challenge would be to simply live simply. Live on less stuff. First of all, this means differentiating between what is a want and what is truly a need, so that we can bring less stuff into our homes. I know that I often struggle with this, that I go to the store and I see this great item that I think is going to make me happy, but I try to pause and ask myself the question, do I really need this, or is this just something I want? And if I'm not sure if it's a need or a want, a lot of times I decide I'm not going to buy it right now. I'm going to go home, I'm going to think about it, I'm going to sleep on it, I'm going to talk to my wife about it. And if I still really feel tomorrow like I need this item, then maybe it's a need. But more often than not, by the time I wake up the next morning, I realize, it's just something flashy that caught my attention at the store that day, and I didn't really need it. But that's just the first half of the equation, not bringing more stuff into our houses that we don't need. The other part of it is remember that stuff you already have can be a trap. That's what my wife and I have been battling with as we're trying to get rid of stuff so that we don't have to move it all to Peatone. And so the next part of this equation is, how do we start getting rid of all this extra stuff that's continuing to trap us once it's in our houses? How do we live more simply? One great tool you can use is called the 90-day test, where you look at the items in your house and you say, have I used this within the last 90 days? Whether it's a shirt that you haven't worn or an item that you haven't used, do I actually use this thing on a regular basis, or has it been 3 months or more since I've used it? Now, obviously, this doesn't apply to seasonal items like your Christmas decorations, or if it's right now it's the middle of summer, so your snow shovel. I hope you haven't used that in the last 90 days. That doesn't mean throw it away. But I'm talking about your clothes or those average everyday household items. If it just simply takes up space, then maybe you don't really need it, and we can live more simply. And so then we have this test that we can use to determine what can I actually get rid of. And that's the final step is, so first we live more within our means. Second, we try to live more simply. And third, we use the stuff that we do have to bless other people. So maybe you have all this stuff in your house now that you realize it was important to me at one time. It has the sentimental value, but I don't really need it. Consider somebody who does need it and give it away. Give that thing a new home. Put it to use in a new context, so that somebody else can be blessed by this thing that at one time you loved, at one time you thought was going to bring you happiness. You can continue to let it bring you happiness by giving it to somebody else who does need it. But this goes deeper than that. This step of using our stuff to bless others. When we have that home that is more simplified, that isn't just full of stuff, now we're free to invite other people into our home. Other people who can share the resources that we have so that we can bless other people. In other parables that Jesus tells, in other of his teachings, he specifically talks about inviting people into our homes who can't necessarily return the favor. So don't just bring people who are at your level in the social circle, or who have more than you, hoping that you can get something out of that. But invite people to have dinner with you who maybe are less fortunate, or people who are on hard times, so that you can bless them and not just expect something else in return. Use the stuff that you have to bless other people. Share the things that you have. Be willing to use those things that you do love, those hobbies that you enjoy, to help other people and to show the love of Christ to those who need it the most. So live within your means. Commit to living more simply, and then use the stuff that you have to bless other people. Because the reason that God blesses us in the first place is so that we can share those blessings with others, share the love of Christ with others, and ultimately point other people toward a relationship with Jesus. Only God can set us free from the prison of our stuff. Let me pray for you. Heavenly Father, I thank you that you are a God who cares about our needs and you take care of us. I pray that you would help us to be people who are less focused on taking care of ourselves and on accumulating all of the things that we want and that we think we need, and help us to be people who are dependent on you. I pray that when you bless us, that we would recognize that it's from you, that it's not just because we earned it or we deserved it, but that you want to bless us so that we can bless others. And so I pray that that's what we would do as you enrich our lives, whether it's with stuff or by any other means. I pray that we would be people who seek to share that with others. I pray that we would be people who open our homes to show your hospitality, that we would share our stuff and our resources to be generous with other people. I pray that we would be people who are known for our generosity, and that would help us to better share your love and your gospel with this world. And it's in Jesus' name that I pray. Amen. Thank you for joining us. Go and be rich toward God this week. Have a great day.